It is an honor to give a talk at the Meaningful Conference. My talk is about the mixed reality for future of sports. I'll deal with aspects of mixed reality as a potential channel for the future sports industry. I'll explain what the virtual, augmented, and mixed realities are, and show the evolution of teaching methods, the limitation points of mixed reality, and corresponding solutions will be mentioned. The last part will be about the future opportunities with mixed reality technologies. First, I'll introduce the concept of the virtual, augmented, and the mixed reality so that you may understand the differences of them. The virtual reality means the immersive environment isolated from the real world. You are surrounded with a graphically and audibly realistic circumstance, and hence it may be felt as a real world. The augmented reality shows on the real world virtual objects such as letters, characters, or animals. Although those objects are shown in 3 dimensions, they may not have meaningful relationship with the surrounding real world. In mixed reality, virtual objects are displayed at a reasonable position along with practical situation or context. Users can interact those virtual objects, and those objects may respond back to the viewers as well. And many market forecasting firms expect a huge expansion of MR services due to the potential of such practical interaction between users and virtual entities. The slide is comparing the VR, AR, and MR. Sometimes extended reality (XR) is used as a concept, including those 3. A term metaverse is widely used for the VR world, where virtual persons and virtual objects interact with each other. In future, probably the metaverse will include XR world, and then we leave the real world mixed with the virtual objects. Now, I will talk about the change around the teaching or training environment. The traditional teaching system can be improved with the VR, AR, and MR technologies. And for the visual performance, the MR dedicated space may be prepared. I'll introduce the MR dedicated teaching facility as the last part of this session. The traditional lecture has its own beauty, and so does the traditional training. I don't agree the replacement of teaching system from the traditional ones to the futuristic VR, AR, MR method. Rather than replacing them, we may need to keep the efficient parts of those traditional methods, and VR, AR, and MR teaching may expand the scope and the dimension of the education. The VR, AR, and MR lectures are useful and beneficial when education is about a dangerous, expensive, or inaccessible object. In addition, those new methods can give immersive experiences. This merit is not limited only to the lecture, but also sports training. You see the VR lecture led by myself with undergraduate students in Postech. All the participants have their own avatars, which are simply made from portrait photos. The lecture can be recorded 3-dimensionally from a viewpoint of any participant. The conventional form of the immersive training is in a certain aspect similar to that of VR. Four surfaces show multiple views of a training scene, and hence trainee may experience as if he or she is on the training field. A trainee may experience the set piece situation as a goalkeeper, watching an incoming ball beyond the scrum. The only thing different from the reality is the haptic sensation of the ball, and even the impact of the ball will be felt in near future by using haptic gloves. The kid is watching a football game in real screen. Many players may be able to experience the signature move and habits of the players in the opponent team. It would be worth watching because it is an image training and investigation of characteristics of individuals in the opposing team as well. Tennis players can virtually train or serve with the trackers that sense the body posture and the racket movement. The trajectory of the ball will be calculated and seen from various viewpoints, and even the body move can be reviewed three-dimensionally. The digital transformation of boat rowing may be one of the easy tasks. The pulling cable delivers rowing sensation, while the VR headset shows a surrounding water surface and background scene. If seat can vibrate, slide, and incline, the realistic movement of the boat can be also expressed. Now, I'll introduce an MR lecture room which was constructed in Postech as the first time up to my knowledge. You see the sample slide. This is a typical showing a concept diagram and the various letters on blank background. Please assume that you see the same image through an MR headset. Then what will the image look like? Even with an expensive MR headset, the visibility would be very poor, especially if the background is bright. White symbols and patterns are rarely visible. This is one of the inherent weak points of MR headsets with optical see-through type optics. And this issue seems not to be resolved in a couple of years, and hence the lecture environment should be modified. By adjusting the illumination and background colors, MR wearers can see the image clearly and even write something on the notebook. Unfortunately, various MR headsets have different transmitters, and certain high-end MR headsets even use a positioning system based on image processing through visible light, and hence the optimal illumination condition may differ for MR headset products. Considering all the points, we designed an MR dedicated lecture room. The colors of the lecture room were carefully selected so that the background hardly degrades the virtual images. The lighting system has a special control board, and it can control the illumination level in many sectors independently. However, for the traditional lecture, this room may be too dark. For the compatibility with such traditional lectures, retractable flex curtains and screens were installed. A variety of MR demonstrations were performed, and one unique example was for the visitors from a military academy. A virtual helicopter and missile launcher were prepared, and the visitors can see the rifles on the desk through MR headsets. The MR lecture room will be used for lectures with virtual objects which are dangerous, expensive, or inaccessible in real world. Even though the VR and MR education has numerous merits, there are still many weak points. These issues and potential solutions will be mentioned. The resolution of current VR and MR headsets is not yet perfect. As an imaging optics, human eye may be described as an angular detector, and our eyes cannot distinguish pixels once the pixel number is over 60 within 1 joule. Commercialized VR headsets usually have pixel density around 50% or less of the mentioned limit. The image quality is getting improved, while the pixel density of microdisplays is gradually being higher and higher. The latency is a crucial performance factor. It is the time from the start of a body movement to the moment that headset shows the revised image corresponding to the movement. VR headset with a too long latency cannot properly display fast objects. It cannot respond immediately when user turns the head so that the wearer feels unpleasant discrepancy between the actual head movement and the panning image. The lag is one of the biggest hurdles for application of VR or MR headsets to the real sport. This latency problem can be addressed by minimizing all the time consumption of individual steps from the movement sensing to the final image displaying. Additional technologies such as movement estimation may be also useful. The real objects are usually opaque. However, MR headsets cannot display an opaque object. This is a fundamental problem due to the nature of the imaging system. Wearers see the real world through the windows of the MR headset, and hence the window should be transparent. And the window always delivers transparent images of virtual objects, which may be opaque in the real world. This harms the sense of reality, and thus it should be overcome if we can. Unfortunately, no one has solved the problem yet with an affordable way. There are a number of relevant researches, and therefore someday we will finally get a solution. The virtual images are made through complicated three-dimensional calculation, and images are reproduced at least 60 times a second to deliver realistic sensation graphically. The computational load is quite heavy. This is why many VR or MR headsets mount chips with sufficient computing power. Sometimes headsets may receive three-dimensional image sets from external computers through a fast communication network rather than calculating all by themselves. This issue may be lightened while the computing chips are getting smaller but stronger, and while the network will be faster. The last issue is about safety. Conventional VR or MR headsets are likely bulky and heavy, and this is not good for sport. For example, please assume a football player wears MR headset. He or she cannot use their head for an incoming ball without taking high risk of injury or headset damage. The solutions are obvious. Headsets should be thin and slim first, and then they should have an appropriate form for protecting wearers and the devices themselves. Once slim and light headsets are developed, various forms such as protecting goggles or contact lenses may be applied to the sports dedicated VR or MR headsets. In the last part, I'd like to introduce various use cases of VR or MR technologies for future sports. First, players can share game scene in three-dimensional image, and it will become very easy to capture realistic images from the player's viewpoint. Such images may be seen via SNS or can be used for in-depth review of the play. Actually, Sky Sports uses VR reproduction of some moments of football matches. A VR headset makes you can watch the match from various viewpoints of each player and very precisely analyze the situation at arbitrary moment. By using similar approaches, we may be able to select specific moments of a sports game and experience the situation from many different aspects. Via MR headset such as HoloLens, players can see virtual team players, opponents, defense line, and even an actual teammate. As shown in the video clip, future players can perform an MR-based formation drill in a hybrid mode. This may be a part of future sports training, and theoretically, it also implies what the future sports matches could look like. It is almost impossible for common persons to compete with a superstar player. However, it will be available when you can download an AI-driven virtual superstar into your MR headset. Although you cannot physically kick the ball or contact the superstar, it will be a quite interesting experience. You can feel how the top-class player is fast and unpredictable. It can be an additional way of enjoying sports in future. Ready Player 21 is a meaningful example of future football training. Many training scenarios may be designed and a trainee can improve reaction speed and accuracy against the balls. Due to the nature of the training with the virtual balls, the player can use his or her head. In the previous slide, MR training case for a single player was given. The MR-based training can be also applied to multiplayer situation. One promising training case is formation drill. Players can be familiar to keeping an offside line with team players. Coaches can construct scenarios with different defense cases, and players can also evaluate how their formation was kept well or not. VR or MR-based training can be used for coaches too. As seen in the video clip, training for decision-making can be made, and it can be also used for reviewing matches. Trainees for future coach can virtually experience a number of practical challenges professional coaches faced. Learning from the decisions made by real coaches and seeking different options, young trainees may experience much more cases beyond their previous coaches did in traditional ways. As the final use case, I would like to introduce a concept of remote game. Players in different locations can play together through MR headsets. They can play with a virtual ball and avatars of other players. However, they rarely run around and compete with others. The ball precisely follows the route a physics engine calculates. This can be a training at the beginning. However, once the latency becomes shorter enough, and the headsets are also well designed for sufficient safety, the remote game can be applied for official sports matches. The risk of injury will be minimized, and the player doesn't need to travel for a game in other country. This change may be useful for common persons as well, and that they can be a part of historical matches. VR and MR technologies have a strong potential for expanding the ways of enjoying sports games. and they can also contribute for safety enhancement. And other fields outside sports, such as electronics industry, service markets, or government, can also take advantages from those changes. The actual contribution of VR and MR from sports industry for the future society can be much more wide, and we are now witnessing the initial steps of evolution. Thank you very much.